Hey everyone, this is Southerd coming at you with a new lesson on Unit 4, Lesson 3. We're talking about the math class. Um, and so in this case, it's not a math class you would take, such as calculus, but rather there is a class that is created for math methods, basically. So today I want to go through a couple of things that we can do. Um, there is an activity guide that accompanies this, which you'll find on Schoology, so you can certainly help yourself to that. Rather than me going back and forth on this video to the activity guide and then whatnot, I thought this would just be kind of a quick supportive video to go through kind of what I noticed and how it might help you. First things first, the activity guide tells us to explore the documentation for the math class and answer the following questions. What types of methods does the math class contain? All the methods of math class are blank, right? So there's a lot of things kind of included in there. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. So I'm going to go to documentation, and then it's going to say, if you click on this drop-down menu, you should find on, I think it's the language, there's math. And these are all of the kind of methods and helpful things that you have in terms of the math class. So it provides methods to perform various math calculations, blah, 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 blah. So you'll see like absolute value, square root, random, something that deals with exponents and power, something to do with ceiling, I guess, or seal. And then we have max min. So there's a lot of those things in here. One of the things you'll find in a couple lessons is there's no round function yet. So that's something that we actually have to probably create. So just kind of looking down the road. But for this one right here, we just need to basically read what's here and then think about what we notice. First things first, we've kind of just kind of going through the units, we've dealt with a painter in terms of our first dabbling of object-oriented programming. Then we worked with some if-then statements, conditionals, we did loops, while loops, we did for loops because we're learning how to traverse through an array in Unit 3. And now we're kind of moving on to kind of a different unit where we're kind of exploring different functions, or sorry, methods and whatnot. Okay, so what we have here is we have the math class. So there's some sort of tester class called Math Runner. And it's including a bunch of these things here. So let's go through it. I'm just looking at line 4. We have int number equals 25. Okay, so we have some variable that's an integer type, and there's 25. And then looks like there's a new line on line 5, which takes the first result. So it's a new variable it comes up with, and does this math dot square root thing right here. Okay, let me see if I can change my pointer a little bit. Let's see. Well, it used to be able to give me kind of a little pointer, a way to annotate. Here you go. There's a spotlight. Maybe I can just do that. So you can kind of see, hopefully this shows a little bit more on your video. We have this math dot square root. So typically we use a dot operator for a dot to call a method. In this case, it has to be math dot square root, math dot pow, math dot abs, right? So pow is for the power. You're going to raise it to a power of. ABS is much different than a New Year's resolution. These are absolute values, right? So it kind of strips the value of the number of its positive or negative value. So anywho, these are different math functions. So I definitely see a bunch of these math functions happening here. So let's go ahead and answer something, right? So I see the various methods of the math class here. Okay, we're going to run it, and something tells me it's going to spit out some numbers. Yep, square root of 25 is 5. Power of 3, it's 3 squared, it should be. Yeah, so it's 3 raised to the second power, right there is 9. Absolute value of negative 16 is 16. So that's that. So let's move along to the second thing. So I showed you where the documentation was, and then I showed you how to find it, and then we're going to move on to part 2. Here, there's a bunch of stuff it wants you to do. Again, you're going to have to refer to the activity guide, but I'll do a couple of these, right, where I kind of played around. So I kind of just go through my own code that I did. And I'll just copy and paste this. And part of the way you're going to learn, funny enough, is you're going to have to kind of play around with the various methods that we have here. So I played around with absolute values. I said double number is negative 0.9, And then I said, hey, what if I did math dot absolute value of said number, right? You have to create different variables here, num2, right? Otherwise, it will keep using the same value, just so you know. So for example, here, if instead of doing double num2 equals 16 on line 11, if I decided not to do that right here, and I decided, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and print the square root of num, right? It's going to take the square root. Let's see what happens. Actually, I might as well play with it while you're sitting here. Oops, let me comment this out. So that means right now it's going to print the square root of, let's just set it to be num, okay, is, and let's just see what error pops up because I did not try this. If it gives you, because you can't take a square root of a negative number, right? Give you an imaginary number. So there's my error that I expected. Oh, of course, it didn't, sorry, it didn't know num2 was available. So let me try that again. Okay, so right now it says the square root of value of negative 0 minus 0.9. And then secondly, here on the compiler or the console, the square root of negative 0.9 is NaN. So you might have seen that if you did comp sci principles last year, if you've done coding before, but that just stands for not a number. So it resulted in an imaginary number. It's not, it's an error that you, it's basically without giving you an error, it's telling you, hey, we can't do this computation for you. So that's that. Again, you're kind of going through the activity guide and going through all this. This one I'll show you as well. Hopefully you attempt, if you haven't attempted yet, I would definitely pause the video and try it yourself right now. But if I'm looking at this, let me get rid of this spotlight stuff. Let me get the spotlight back on, and then I'll get rid of that. Oh, okay, just gets rid of the spotlight. Never mind. So here in this case, these are kind of like, yeah, I've seen a lot of these questions pop up, and we're going to do some AP classroom work as well on this. We have some sort of number 1 is equal to 25. A second variable called num2 is 2.0. Those are both double, so they have decimals. And it's telling me to take the absolute value of num1 minus num2 plus the square root of the first number plus the second number raised to the second power. Okay, and then print that result. So beware here because, you know, you might remember PEMDAS from a long time ago, but you don't want to necessarily, you don't want to mess up on the math, right? So the math should be an easier part of the AP exam if you see a question like this. Feel free to use scratch paper, paper and pencil. They'll be providing the AP exam as well. Obviously you're going to do it on paper and pencil anyway, but just go ahead and do the math. Don't try and do it in your head. So let me bring up my little annotation thing. Let's just go ahead and write it out because that's totally okay, right? Let me do this guy. I guess I'll use Rogers Blue. Okay, so in this case we have, let me move my little thingy. Can I move it up over to the side? There we go. So if I did num1 is 25, can I zoom in a little bit here? It will get mad at me. Maybe I can't zoom in. Shoot. Okay, well, anyway, the first number is 25. So I'm gonna go ahead and write 25, right? And we're gonna do the absolute value of that 25 minus the second value, which is 2, okay? So obviously that number is going to be what, 23, isn't it? So I'm just sorry for my crappy handwriting because I'm trying on my trackpad here. Okay, so you can't read that very well, but 25 minus 2 is 23. So I'm doing this kind of, might be hard to see on your screen, but when you look at code.org, that's what math.the absolute value of num1 minus num2 will give you. It'll give you 23, right? Because 25 minus 2 is 23. So that's done. And then we're going to go ahead and add that, right, with the second part, which is the square root of the first number, which is the square root of 25, right? And without me doing too much here, you should know square root of 25, hopefully in your sleep, is just a 5. All right. And then finally, we're going to add math.pow. So it's going to raise num2. That's the first thing that comes up, which is 2 to the second power. Okay, so that's going to be 2 squared, last I checked, is 4. So 23 plus 5 plus 4 is going to be 32, if I can touch that. So anyway, that's that. Just make sure it works. Did I miss anything? Got it. Okay, should go on to the next one. And then, of course, I have to get rid of all this. Okay, so you're going to kind of play around with this a bit. I did all of these, but easy thing to do here. Let's maybe just go with I guess we'll do roller coasters. And I can get rid of these last blue dots. So basically here we want to use that math feature, okay, or the math class, and we want to do some math. Specifically, what's asking me to do is declare initialize a constant, okay? So I'll show you how to do that. And then it wants to use the get child friendly method to update the condition to use the constant. Okay, so let's look at travel agency.java, which is what it wants us to look at. And it says we need to declare and initialize a constant called child max speed to 35. Okay, so first things first, we have child max speed. And one of the things you'll need to learn, you might remember from the second lesson or unit 5 lesson, sorry, we're on unit 4 lesson 2, was this idea of what is a static variable. These are great for things that you don't necessarily want to modify, that's just kind of stays there. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to have a variable. So to get there, we're going to go with public because we're going to declare and initialize this variable. It has to be a constant, so it needs to be static. Okay, and then remember, we need it to be final as well, so that you're not changing this at all later. Then we're going to do int, and then I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that child max speed. That's the variable they want me to call it at, and just set it equal to 35. And that's done. Okay, let's go ahead and run it while I can to make sure there's no errors with what I just wrote, and there shouldn't be any. And it's taking a while, which is kind of odd. Okay, so it's done. There's no errors. Right, let's just check. Yep. And then what I need to do here is it wants me to update this condition, public string. So this is for a method called getChildFriendly, and it needs to produce a result of the child-friendly roller coasters. Okay. So right now, all you got to do you see how it says this is an enhanced for loop, as we remember, so I might as well write that in, right? That looks familiar. And then here we have, let's see, I'm getting a phone call. Okay, so in this case, we have, instead of 35 here for the get speed and that enhanced for loop, right? We want to make sure that instead of trying to update this every time, we'd rather just change that 35 to that variable, the constant called child max speed. Let's say somewhere along the line, you might reference this a bunch of times in different loops or methods that you have. So rather than going one by one and trying to change 35 every time, why don't you just go ahead and set that static variable right here, right? And then keep referencing that variable in all your methods so that you only have one spot that you need to update this in, if that makes sense. So that's that. And I think that was it for that. And you'll see the same output. So we're done with that. I'll go ahead and test it. Okay, were there any? Okay, I succeeded. Yeah, so that's all you gotta do for those ones. And you're gonna do the same for all. If you want to do all 4 choices, that's great. But I would just do 2. I did A for you, so do B, C, or D. And then we're gonna keep moving right along to the 5th one. And on that one, I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. This is where you actually get to use the math calculators. So just go with the exponent, I guess, the first one. In this case, we want to do a bunch of the calculations using the math class. And let me try and make this a little bit bigger for us. Okay, there we go. Calculate the result of the parameter first number raised to parameter the second number. So the first thing I'm going to do is we need to use the prompt user method, and that's over here. Okay, which is, do you remember the scanner, right? So that's going to go ahead and prompt the number in the console. So let's go ahead and go back, and so that's already done for us. So we just need to go ahead and call it up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and prompt user for the first number. Okay, so we're going to do double, I'll call it first number equals, and we need to use the calculator class, right? And let me just make sure I'm doing this right. So calculator, yeah, so we need to use that calculator class. Oops, am I missing something here? So calculator, we have calc exponent. Oh, shoot, I forgot to do that. I'm sorry. We have to go to calculator.java right here. Before I just go ahead and start asking the user, I actually need to um, come up with a method, right, to actually do this, right? So let me go ahead and do that. Okay. So if we want to calculate the result of the parameter, first number raised to the power of the second number, okay, so let's call it some variable. We'll call it result, and it needs to be a double. It has to deal with decimals, right? Um, in case the user gives us a decimal, 1.2 or 1.7 or whatever it is, raised to the second power will result in a decimal. So you want to make sure we're prepared for that. We're going to go ahead and use the math function. We're going to use the power function, or sorry, the math class. We're going to use the power method essentially. And it's going to prompt for this parameter. They want first number. I'm just reading what's written here in the to-dos. And it's going to be raised to the second number, right? So that's going to be the first number raised to the second power, second number. And then what we need to return is not a blank. We need it to actually return specifically what does it want? Oh, it needs to, I'm just reading it first number. It needs to return first number. And I'm gonna do concatenation. Raised to the power of second number. And then it, oops, space is, and then one more concatenation for the result. Okay, let me go ahead and just run this and make sure I'm not doing anything. Oh, I might have left the first one blank, so that probably gave me an error. Yep, it did. So let me go back here because I didn't do anything. So double first number. Okay, so we created the method. Now I actually need to do something with this, right? And we're going to double the first number, or sorry, we're going to use the first number and we need to get it from the user. That method down here was called what? We need to use, oh, prompt user. Okay. So I'm going to use the calculator class and call up the prompt user to get that number from them. So let me just run it real quick and see if we got rid of that illegal start. Okay, so now we're getting a number, so call it 17, and it's got it. Okay, so let's clear the console. Let me drag it up a little bit. Okay, and then once I do that, I need to prompt user for a second number, right? That's going to be double second number equals calculator dot user. So it allows the user to go ahead and input the second one. Okay, so let's go ahead and run it just to make sure it works. I'm going line by line just to be careful. So we got, let's do 2 to the third power, right? So those are now inputted. So no errors. That's why I ran it. And then finally, we need to, what do they want to do? Call the calc exponent method with the two numbers provided. So it's going to be system.out.println, right? Because we want to print these numbers. And we're going to go ahead and do that calculator command or calculator class. And we're going to do the calc exponent method. So I need to use the dot operator. And then we're going to do the first number, whoops, right correctly, second number. So just to kind of recap what we're doing here, I'll go ahead and run it while I'm talking. It's going to print out. So we're going to use the calculator, right? Class, and we're going to use the calc exponent method in there. It's going to take the first number, which is coming from the user, which I'm typing in now, which is 2. And then we're going to put in the second number, which is 3. And so now what should be produced is 2.0 raised to the power of 3.0 is 8.0. Right? So 2 cubed is in fact 8. If I want to do this again, you can just check with decimals, right? So I did 1.1 raised to the second power, right? And there you go. There it gives you a decimal. So you need to be prepared for those two answers. I think that's it for that. The other ones will ask for square roots, but the idea here is you will write, you will use this math.pow, math.abs, math.sqrt. So definitely look at the documentation to see what methods you need. And the more you play with this, the better it'll be for you. Good luck.